I went from point number 8 to point number 10 this morning and did not give you point 9, which is brag about your position and your possessions. Haman loved to do that. We know he brought everybody in, told them all the stuff that he had, the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and the honor that had been given him by King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes. And let me just say this under that point. Position and possessions are a reason for praise. They are not a reason for pride. Let me say that again. Position and possessions are a reason for praise. They are not a reason for pride. Some of you play in the orchestra. Some of you play very well, and you have tremendous talent, and you use it for the Lord. And others of us, the only thing we could play was a radio. And you get to be up there and do music, and those of us who can't play an instrument don't get to do that. Now, there is some element of truth in the fact that the people in the orchestra practiced, and they worked, and they developed a skill that could be used for the glory of God. But there's some people that absolutely, positively have zero musical ability. Dr. Howes used to say, when I sing, the angels weep, David lays down his harp, and heaven's flag is flown at half-mast. I never heard him sing, but I've heard people of whom that would be true. So if you have the ability, thank the Lord. Lord, I'm glad I can do this for you. If God gives you possessions, thank you, Lord. I enjoy them, and I'm glad I can use them for your cause and your service. But don't think that makes you better than somebody else. Silly. Then I said focus on small irritations instead of large blessings this morning. And I want to go back and talk about 3 things. I'm probably going to add a 4th one if I have time. Number 11, if you want to hang yourself, believe that you are the center of the universe. Now, I'm probably going to get in trouble here, but I always have so much better attention when I say the things I shouldn't say than when I say the things I should say. When God blesses and uses people, it's very easy for them to think that everything revolves around them. And so I've told you the story of a man who was a great man, pastored 2 of the 2 largest churches in America at the same time, one in Texas, one in Detroit. And Dr. Bill Rice was a follower of his. J. Frank Norris had been a mentor and an example to him. But Dr. John Rice, Dr. Bill's older brother, had already broken fellowship with J. Frank Norris. And one day, Bill Rice caught J. Frank Norris in a lie. And he went to his brother and said, what do? I just can't believe this, and this is so terrible. And Dr. John said, well, you're going to have to go talk to him about it. So Bill Rice went into J. Frank Norris. Now, he might have thought that Dr. Norris would make an excuse. He might have thought he'd be upset. He might have thought that he would give him a hard time, but he didn't do any of those things. Here's what he said. He kind of leaned back in his chair, I imagine, and said, well, Bill, you know, I've done so much for the Lord all these years that He just gives me a little leeway in those areas. I'm so important to God that I can get away with stuff nobody else can. You're getting ready to be hung. You think others can do it and they'll get in trouble, and you do it and you get in no trouble because you really matter to the cause of Christ. I heard a preacher say one time about a great church and a wonderful church. He said, you destroyed this church and you've destroyed old-time fundamentalism. I'm sorry. The work of God is never ridden on the success or failure of any one church or any one man or any one ministry or any one movement. God is perfectly capable of sustaining His people without your help if need be. And we get that idea that whatever we feel is what matters most, and however we're treated is how we should judge a person's behavior. And their attitude toward us is what they are as a person. And Haman didn't care about anybody but Haman as long as Mordecai didn't bow. It didn't matter that the kingdom was doing well. He was going to kill all the Jews. Didn't matter that the king would lose more money by having them destroyed and not paying taxes than he would have ever gained by getting their possessions one time and being put in the treasury. All Haman cared about was Haman. Next thing is this: desire inappropriate honor. I love chapter 6. I'm going to read some of it to you. I want to read more of it to you, but it goes into the next part of the story. But the king calls Haman in. And the king had said in verse 4, who is in the court? Now Haman was coming to the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king, to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in. And the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Watch this. Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Wow. If something's going to be given away, it's got to be given to me. If something's going to be done, it's got to be done for me. If something's going to happen, it's got to happen to me. Haman had so much done for him that he didn't deserve, that he thought he deserved even more. I knew a preacher one time. He was a friend of mine. He's not in the ministry anymore. And his church had been very good to him. They'd bought him cars, and they'd spent a lot of money fixing up his office, and they helped him. They gave him a house, made it so he could have a house, all kind of stuff. And one time he had some celebration, and so they knew about a particular book that he wanted, and so they gave him the book. And they said, preacher, we want you to have this book. And he said, yeah. You didn't just give me a book. No, preacher, that's what we got this time, just that book. Yeah, I know better than that. You people are too generous for that. There's something else in here. No, preacher, we just gave you the book. Yeah, no, there's nothing else in there. You see, just because somebody does something for you once doesn't mean they have to do it again. Doesn't mean they owe it to you. Doesn't mean that you deserve it. Doesn't mean that you have any right to expect it. And Haman had been given so much honor, he thought, well, now's my chance. And so here's what he says. This is really interesting when you look at what Haman asks the king to do. And Haman answered the king, verse 7, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with all whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man that the king whom the king delighteth to honor. Now let's understand what Haman did. The royal apparel, in this era, in this country, only the king could wear purple. Nobody else could wear purple except the king. It was the color of royalty, and only royalty could wear it. In this kingdom, there was a breed of horse that had been bred for royalty, and only the king could ride on that horse. And Haman, thinking it would be done for himself, said, let me wear your robe, and let me sit on your horse, and let somebody run through the whole town and say, thus shall it be done for the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Haman essentially said, I want you to make me king. I want you to treat me just like I am the king. Do you know nobody deserves to be the king? There is one king for Bible believers, and his name is Jesus. Some of our forefathers in battle would go out to cry, and they would have this rallying cry as they fought oppressors and those who had robbed them of religious liberty in the early days of our country. They cried as they went out into the battle, no king but Jesus. Haman wanted to be the king. He said, well, I want to wear President Obama's suit. And I want to sit at his desk, and I want to ride in his limousine, and I want everybody to know this is the man the president wants to take care of it, if you want to put it in contemporary terms. Now, I love what happens next. I love it. The king says, well, that's a great idea. Why don't you do that for Mordecai? And Haman sworn, just get the irony of this. Haman has walked in to ask if he can hang Mordecai on this 75-foot high gallows. Before he can get any words out of his mouth, the king said, hey, what should I do for somebody I want to honor? And Haman gives him all those ideas. And then the king says, good, do that for Mordecai. Now, it'd be mortifying for Haman to have to give anybody that kind of honor and attention because he thought he deserved it himself. But it was appalling that he had to do it for the man that he had taken on as his enemy. Desire inappropriate honor. I was talking to somebody one time, and they didn't feel they'd been treated well. They didn't feel, they felt like they'd done a lot of stuff and hadn't got enough attention. And one of the things they said was, and I didn't even have an office. Now, they were not on staff. I don't know if you know this or not, but not everybody on staff has an office. Our teachers have a desk in their room. They don't have an office. Now, we have some secretaries, 3 people share one office. Not everybody has an office, but this person they had a ministry in the church, and they're a good person, and I love them still, and they were serving God, but they thought they should have had an office. Wonder why? It's because an office was essential for the conducting of their work. Nope. They were on the premises so much that it makes sense. Nope. They just wanted an office. They wanted to be somebody. They wanted to have something done for them. They wanted to be given lots of attention. When I preached in Long Beach a couple of weeks ago, Brother Jerry Vargo took me on a tour of the Queen Mary. I almost demurred and said, no, let me just get the room, get some stuff done. But I thought, I probably should do that. It'll be a unique experience. It was very instructive to me. And he told the story, and the man that had been in charge of setting up the name for the Queen Mary had verified this with a newspaper reporter, but he said, you cannot print this until after I die. This line, the Cunard line, all their ships' names ended with an IA. They had the Lusitania, and they had others like that. And they decided when they built this, the largest and the fastest and the most luxurious of all ocean liners, that they wanted to name it the Victoria. The Queen Victoria was the name of the ship. So they went into the current Queen of England and her husband, who was a lady named Mary. And they said, this man said, he said, we've decided we would like to name this ship after England's most famous queen. And Queen Mary said, I would be honored. And so they had a ship that was not ended in IA. You can't change it after that. Now, I don't know if Queen Mary ever found out what the original intentions were, and they took some time not to embarrass her, and the man said, I cannot be in bad standing with the royal family. It will do no good to my career or the career of my company, the business of my company, should that happen. But just, it's funny, it's ironic. And she just assumed she was England's most famous queen. England's had a lot of queens. Had a lot of queens before, some queens after, some that would serve much longer than her, and some that had done much more notable things as far as accomplishments were concerned, but she just assumed, whom would the Cunard Shipping Company delight to honor more than myself? I don't know your secret desires. I don't know what it is you think you ought to have that you don't. I don't know what attention you wish was yours, which promotion would come to you that you think, you ought to have and it hasn't come. I don't know where you think somebody's unfairly paid attention to somebody else and they haven't paid attention. I don't know what's going on in your heart. But you just keep thinking about that. And you just get a little upset and disturbed because others have something you think you deserve. You just keep hoping for it and looking for an opportunity. And maybe you can even finagle a little bit and try to get it for yourself. Just do that. Because it's a real good step toward hanging yourself. Desire inappropriate honor. Here's the next one. Panic when you get caught. Esther is on a couch, one of these royal banquets where they lay down and they don't really sit up at a table, and she's got like a chaise lounge kind of deal. And she says the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman, and the king gets mad and he walks out, and Haman decides he's going to ask Esther for help, and he falls down upon her bed. Do you know that if you met the Queen of England today, you don't shake her hand? Huge breach of etiquette to try to shake hands with royalty. If you're a man, you bow. If you're a lady, you curtsy. You don't go and say, "Hey, Queenie, how you doing, babes?" Pat her on the shoulder. You don't do that. But in this era, remember, you couldn't even walk into the presence of the king, let alone touch him, without him having called you, or you were automatically killed unless he held out the golden scepter. And this is a gigantic breach of etiquette. I mean, this is crazy. But Haman isn't thinking straight. He is just in so much trouble. And just then, while he's fallen on the bed of the queen, the king walks back in. And he says, "Oh, you okay, Haman? You needing help?" Will he force the queen? "In my own palace." And while the words proceeded out of the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. What do you do when you get in trouble? Most of us panic and try to find some way to get ourselves out. I don't know if I've told you who this is before. We had a man in the church for many years, did not come often, but good, nice guy named Jim Schutz. Jim and Maggie. Jim asked me one time, would you go out to Frankenmuth on a Saturday evening and help my wife and I renew our vows for our 25th wedding anniversary? I said, sure. This is a while ago, and I put it in my Palm Pilot on the to-do list for that Saturday. I did not set an alarm for it. I just put it on the to-do list. I'd see the list of things that I was doing, and I'd know what I had to do. I'd go on. Well, again, that Saturday was one of those Saturdays I knew what I had to do. It was clear in my, I had phone calls to make, had a few things to do. Sermon was done, I think, and so I just had some regular things to do, and I did my stuff, and I went home. Palm Pilots or any other electronic devices are totally ineffective if they're left off. So Monday, the phone rings. And they say, it's Jim Schutz. All of a sudden, I remembered. Now, I'm sure you're a better Christian than me, and I'm sure this thought would never enter your mind. But my first thought was, what excuse can I make to get out of this? What story can I tell him? What can I say? What can I, And I picked up the phone. I said, Brother Schutz, I am so sorry. You are going to hate me forever. No, he said, you know what? They had the car show that week. About half people didn't come anyway. I figured you just got stuck in traffic. I said, no, Brother Schutz, I didn't get stuck in traffic. It just, I totally forgot. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'll ever do to be able to make it up for. He said, just be your usual nice self. And a few years later, he got sick. I visited him in the hospital. He was talking with his wife, and he said, I want Pastor Willette to do my funeral. And she said, you do? He said, yeah, but he'll probably forget. And I went to the funeral, and I told the story. Now, let me give you a verse. He that covereth his sin shall not prosper. The first part of the verse says, whoso confesseth and forsaketh, he that covereth sin, his first part, shall not prosper. Whoso confesseth and forsaketh him shall find mercy. When you get stuck, when you get in trouble, don't panic. Don't scramble. Don't begin to run to your own devices. Don't let your flesh lead you into some worse problem. Do what David did. David did a really awful thing. He committed adultery, and then he had the husband of the woman murdered to cover up his sin. And Nathan came and told him the story about the lambs, and David got all upset because somebody stolen somebody's pet lamb, and he said, whoever did this is going to die, and well, at least they'll restore fourfold. And Nathan said, thou art the man. And David said, I have sinned. I always find it intriguing that the first king of Israel, Saul, lost the throne for a far less consequential sin than David committed. Saul was supposed to kill the Amalekites, and he went and he fought them, but he kept Agag alive. And he's supposed to wipe out all the animals, all the children. They're the sworn enemies of God, and God wanted them destroyed. But he kept the best of the sheep alive, and the things that were vile and refuse he destroyed. And when Saul got in trouble, he said, well, the people wanted to keep them. Well, the people and I. And when it got all done, and Saul was told by Samuel, you're done, you're out of here. You know what he said? He said, honor me now in front of the people. Let's at least keep a good front on it. Let's pretend that I'm still going to be the king, and I'll have the man of God out there with me, even though God's departed from me. And Saul was more interested in looking right than being right, and David decided he wanted to be right. And Saul came to that time at the end of his life where Samuel was dead and God didn't answer him, and he felt all alone, and he ends up going to see a witch. And when he dies, the Bible tells us that's one of the reasons that he dies. Panic when you get caught if you want to hang yourself. One other thing I'll say, and I reference this often, I preach on it every once in a while. I talk to people about it in counseling. I often preach on this subject when I'm preaching meetings at another church. You see, you want to sum it all up. If you want to hang yourself, get bitter. Get bitter because one man doesn't bow. Get bitter because you don't get your way. Get bitter because you don't think you got the attention you deserve. Get bitter because somebody doesn't submit themselves to your will. Get bitter. Looking diligently, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of bread sold his birthright. Proverbs 26:27 is a proverb that I think is applicable to this story. And it says this, it says, whoso diggeth a pit shall fall therein. You go ahead, devise these ways to get even with people. Tell the stories about them. Dig your pits for them. Get ready to fall in the pit you dug for somebody else. Get ready to hang by the gallows that you constructed for Mordecai. In China, some years ago, there was a man who was responsible, as was the custom in those days, no welfare programs or anything like that, to care for his aged father. And the father was feeble, and he couldn't contribute to the livelihood of the household, and he couldn't help with their expenses, and he really wasn't in any trouble. He didn't require a great deal of care. But the young man got tired of taking care of his dad. So he built a box. And he put his frail father in the box, and he put the box on his shoulder, and he went up to the top of a mountain. And there he was going to leave his father at a desolate place and maybe give him a little food and water and let him sit there until he died. And as he was carrying the box up the hillside, there was some bang, and he thought, oh, now what? He's going to whine, he's going to complain, he's going to put me on a guilt trip. He said, what do you want? And the father just said 3 words for him. He said, save the box. See, someday you'll be old. Someday you'll be a burden on somebody. Someday somebody will be tired of feeding an extra mouth, and it'll be your mouth, so your son will be in the spot you're in sometimes. Save the box. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Our Heavenly Father, please, by your Spirit,